parents were afraid of him. Politicians were saying, we're not going to have him.
Amazing.
And he never rebutted.
Jerry Schilling kept a secret for decades after Elvis made him swear. People assumed he had nothing to say, but they were wrong. He had everything to say. Now, at the age of 79, something changed. The man Elvis trusted so much has finally decided the world deserves to know the truth. So, what exactly has he been hiding? The man behind the king. Some friendships start in the most ordinary places, like this one on a Sunday afternoon in 1954, when a 12-year-old boy from North Memphis wandered into a pickup football game on a dusty field. He found that his team was being quarterbacked by a 19-year-old named Elvis Presley, the same teenager whose first record, That's All Right, had just debuted on Memphis radio. That chance moment on a football field would grow into one of the most personal bonds in the history of American entertainment. Nobody could have known it then, not even the two boys themselves. Jerry Schilling grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and became friends with Elvis despite the age difference between them. In a city where social lines were drawn tightly, that friendship stood out. Elvis was already beginning his climb. Jerry was still a kid trying to figure out his place in the world. But something clicked between them. Jerry had a simple dream back then, to attend Humes High School before he ever knew Elvis. He remembered the school band marching down the street in their orange and white uniforms, and thinking it was the most exciting thing he had ever seen. Life, of course, had bigger plans for him. As Elvis's fame grew, the friendship did not fade the way many childhood bonds do. It deepened. Elvis went on the road, made records, made movies, and became a global phenomenon. Jerry went on with his own life during those years, but whenever Elvis came back to Memphis, they stayed connected. When Elvis bought Graceland, Jerry was always welcome there at night. The house, as they called it, never felt closed to him. That open door was not extended to everyone. Elvis was selective about who he truly trusted, and he trusted Jerry. In 1964, Elvis asked Jerry to come work for him. It happened on the front porch of Graceland one night. Elvis told Jerry he needed him. Jerry thought for only about 10 seconds before saying yes. The next day, he quit 2 jobs and told the university he would not be returning to teacher training. It was a decision that changed the course of his life entirely. He walked away from a usual path and stepped into the most unconventional world imaginable. He did it without hesitation, because Elvis asked him to, and because Jerry believed in what their friendship was worth. Over the next 13 years, Jerry worked for Elvis in a range of roles, from bodyguard to photo double to co-executive producer on a karate film. But titles never captured what he really was to Elvis. He was a genuine friend in a world full of people who wanted something from the king. Longtime Elvis associate George Klein described Jerry as one of the few men who would actually tell Elvis the truth. He had a different angle, Klein said, because he had quality time with Elvis, and Elvis respected his opinion on many things. That was rare. Around Elvis, honesty was not always welcome, but from Jerry, it was expected and appreciated. Jerry resided at Graceland for extended periods of up to 10 years, giving him immediate access to Elvis's daily life and influencing routine decisions about everything. He was not just staff, he was present in the most intimate moments of Elvis's private world. Elvis trusted Jerry with protecting his life when threats arrived. He asked Jerry to drive him and Priscilla to the hospital the day Lisa Marie was born. And he brought Jerry along during the famous Lost Weekend when they ended up in the Oval Office with President Nixon. Each of those moments tells a story about how deep the trust really ran. Jerry Schilling would go on to build a serious career in entertainment entirely on his own terms. After his years with Elvis, he spent 4 decades in the entertainment industry as an actor, film editor, producer, and manager for acts including the Beach Boys, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Billy Joel. He was not a man who needed to lean on Elvis's name to survive. He had his own accomplishments, his own life, and his own identity. That independence made his loyalty to Elvis all the more meaningful. He stayed not because he had to, but because he chose to. What made Jerry Schilling different from others in Elvis's circle was something harder to define than job title or years of service. He was described as the last holdout of the Memphis Mafia to write a book about his friend. While others rushed to publish tell-alls in the years after Elvis passed away, Jerry stayed silent. He watched others cash in, he watched the stories pile up, he watched the public image of Elvis shift and reshape itself through every new headline. During that time, he said very little. That silence was itself a statement. It was the silence of a man who understood that some things were not his to give away, at least not yet. The man behind the king was never trying to be famous. He was never trying to be part of the story. As one reflection on his memoir noted, Jerry wrote from a perspective without a personal agenda. Priscilla and Lisa Marie both read and approved of what he wrote. That approval from the Presley family meant everything. It meant he had told the truth, and told it with care. He had been entrusted with a friendship that shaped his entire life, and he treated that trust with the kind of respect that most people never show, and most friendships never require. Extracted, a vow of silence. There are moments between two people that cannot be explained to the outside world. They happen in private, away from cameras and crowds, in the kind of calm that only exists between people who have known each other for a very long time. For Jerry Schilling and Elvis Presley, those moments were many, but one stood apart from all the others. One moment came with a weight that Jerry would carry for the rest of his life. Elvis looked at his closest friend and asked him to promise something, and Jerry, of course, said yes. To understand why that promise mattered so deeply, it helps to understand the world Elvis lived in. By the early 1970s, Elvis Presley was not just a famous man. He was a machine, a business, a brand that generated enormous amounts of money for an enormous number of people. Jerry Schilling himself described the group around Elvis as a circle of loyal and trusted friends whose job was to safeguard Presley, noting that Elvis viewed himself as a multi-million-dollar business that required constant protection. Inside that machine, privacy was nearly impossible. Elvis was surrounded at all hours. Every word he spoke in front of the group had the potential to become a story someday. He knew that, and it made him careful about what he said, and to whom he said it. Elvis had good reason to be cautious. Over the years, people he had trusted had sold stories to newspapers, cooperated with unauthorized books, and shared private details that should have stayed behind closed doors. What bothered Elvis most when criticism came was that it was coming from inside, from friends he had been good to and had done things for. That kind of betrayal cut deeper than anything the press could say about him. It came from people who had eaten at his table, lived under his roof, and accepted his generosity. When those people turned, Elvis felt it in a way that public criticism never reached him. It changed how he thought about loyalty. It changed who he chose to confide in. Jerry was one of the very few who never made Elvis feel that way. Their friendship had survived arguments, separations, and long periods apart. Jerry had quit working for Elvis more than once over the years, and yet Elvis always found his way back to calling on him. The bond between them reset itself time and again because it was built on something real. Not money, not fame, not proximity, but real affection and real respect. That was why, when Elvis needed to share something he could not carry alone, he turned to Jerry, the longer-serving member of the group. The nature of what Elvis asked Jerry to protect was layered in personal complexity. It touched on the parts of Elvis's life that he had spent years keeping out of public sight. Elvis was a deeply private man beneath the spectacle. Once, Jerry arrived at Graceland to find Elvis walking downstairs with his father, Vernon. Elvis wearing an oxygen mask, looking weak and frail. Elvis noticed Jerry's shock, removed the mask, smiled, and made a light joke about California smog. He never told Jerry what was actually wrong with him. That moment illustrated something important about Elvis. He did not want the people around him to see him as vulnerable. He worked hard to project strength and control, even when both were slipping away from him. And yet, there were things Elvis could not keep to himself entirely. Some truths were too heavy to carry in complete solitude. So he chose his moments carefully, and he chose his confidence even more carefully. When he brought something to Jerry, it was because he had decided that Jerry was the only one he could fully trust with it. People around Elvis thought he could do whatever he wanted, but that was not true. There were things he desperately wanted that were being kept from him. Creative opportunities, artistic freedom, a different kind of life. And only a small number of people understood the full weight of that frustration. Jerry was one of them, so the promise Elvis extracted from him was not a casual thing. He was asking Jerry to protect something that mattered deeply to him. Something about who he really was beneath the concerts, the costumes, and the fame that had followed him everywhere since he was a teenager. Jerry stayed silent for decades because he understood that some truths required distance. While others cashed in on quick spills, Jerry waited because he wanted to be able to offer a version of Elvis that was neither a caricature nor a whitewashed saint. The secret he had been asked to keep was part of that fuller picture. Releasing it too soon, or in the wrong context, or for the wrong reasons, would have been a betrayal, and betrayal was the one thing Jerry Schilling had never been willing to offer Elvis Presley. The vow of silence sat with Jerry through decades of changes, through the grief of losing his closest friend at such a young age, through the rise of the Elvis industry that turned the man into a symbol, through every book written by people who had known Elvis far less well than Jerry did, through every documentary, every anniversary tribute, every headline. Jerry kept the promise, year after year, because a promise made to a dying man, or one who feared what the world would do with the truth, is not the kind of promise you break just because time has passed. The decades of pressure. When Elvis Presley passed away on August 16, 1977, the world did not mourn quietly. The king of rock and roll was found unconscious at his Graceland mansion in Memphis. He was just 42 years old. The shock of his demise spread across the entire globe. Fans grieved in the streets. Radio stations played nothing but his music for days. And within the inner circle, the group of men who had built their lives around him, everything suddenly went very still. Then, almost immediately, everything started to fall apart. The machine that had run on Elvis's name now ran on the stories people were willing to tell about him. Jerry Schilling had built his own life in parallel to his friendship with Elvis. After Elvis passed away, there was a long period where Jerry did not talk about him publicly or professionally. He tried to go on with his own life. He had a management company. He managed the Beach Boys and Jerry Lee Lewis and worked with Billy Joel. He was more fortunate than some of his friends who did not have those alternatives. That life gave him somewhere to direct his energy. It gave him a reason not to look backward. But the world kept pulling him back toward the name of his deceased friend and the expectations that came with it. The pressure on Jerry to speak was relentless. Publishers came with offers. Documentary filmmakers wanted access. Journalists tried every angle they could think of. The Elvis story was an industry, and Jerry Schilling was sitting on what everyone believed to be the most valuable material still left unspoken. He was widely described as the last holdout of the Memphis Mafia to write a book about his friend. While others had already published their memoirs, given their interviews, and sold their behind-the-scenes accounts, Jerry continued to hold back. What made the pressure particularly complicated was that the people pushing him hardest often had no real understanding of what they were asking. They wanted stories, they wanted revelations, they wanted the kind of scandalous detail that sells books and fills television segments. But the things Jerry held closest were not sensational in the way outsiders imagined. They were personal. They were about a human being, not an icon. And releasing them carelessly into a world that had already decided what Elvis was and what his story meant felt deeply wrong. Jerry has spoken about the profound loss he carried after Elvis passed away. He said clearly and plainly that he felt he lost his friend at an early age because of creative disappointment, and that he knew it deeply. That grief was not something he could simply narrate for public consumption. It was real, and it was raw even years later. To turn it into content, to package the most painful parts of what he witnessed into a product for the entertainment industry, was something Jerry could not bring himself to do, at least not in the way people wanted him to do it. The years passed and the figures around Elvis began to disappear one by one. Colonel Tom Parker, the controversial manager who had shaped and constrained Elvis's career, passed away in 1997. After Elvis passed away, Jerry became one of Parker's closest confidants. That dynamic told its own story. The people linked to Elvis carried secrets that only came out slowly, partially, and sometimes not at all. Each passing year removed another person who had been present during the private moments. Each loss made Jerry's testimony more singular and more irreplaceable. When Jerry eventually began speaking more openly about Elvis's demise, he shared his belief on why Elvis lost his life, that his genius was given mediocre work, and that the frustration of that reality caused the deeper problems that followed. But even that truth had limits. It opened a door without revealing everything behind it. Jerry was threading a needle carefully, sharing enough to correct the record on some things, while still protecting the deeper material he had sworn to keep. When his memoir was published, it was reviewed as a work that offered a balanced treatment of a complex subject. What distinguished it most was its emotional honesty, the generosity of spirit with which Jerry tried to capture his friend and mentor as a real human being, not a legend. That was exactly the intention. He wrote it on his own terms, in his own time, for reasons that had nothing to do with money or fame. And even then, even in that memoir, certain things remained unsaid. The promise he had made to Elvis still held. The silence around the deepest truth remained intact. Now, at 79, Jerry Schilling is at a point in life where the calculations change. The people who needed protection from the truth are largely gone. The years have given the story enough distance to be told without tearing everything apart. And there is something else. The knowledge that when Jerry himself is gone, the truth goes with him. The promise to Elvis was about protecting him. But at some point, protecting someone's memory means making sure the true version of who they were survives. Jerry has reached that point. The silence is finally over. The revelation. The secret at the heart of this story is not the kind that makes headlines in an obvious way. It is not a crime or a scandal in the usual sense of those words. It is something more painful and more complex than that. It is the story of a man who is one of the greatest artists the world has ever seen, and who was slowly, systematically, denied the chance to grow into the full version of what he could have been. Elvis Presley knew this about himself. He felt it every single day. And he asked Jerry Schilling never to let the world know just how deep that wound really went. The creative frustration Elvis carried was not a secret to the people close to him, but the full extent of it, the private moments of despair, the specific conversations, the things Elvis said when the cameras were off and the crowds were gone, those were kept inside the walls of whatever room Elvis occupied when he let his guard down. Around the age of 40, multiple things were closing in on him at once. The creative disappointments were real. His divorce left him wanting his family back in a way that was not going to happen. His body was breaking down. He could have handled any one of those things individually, but together they took a devastating toll. The clearest and most heartbreaking example of that creative loss came in 1975. Elvis and Jerry, along with a couple of others, were squeezed into a walk-in closet at the Las Vegas Hilton, looking for a quiet spot backstage away from the noise. Barbra Streisand was there. She pitched Elvis the co-starring role in her film, A Star is Born. The conversation went on for more than 2 hours. Elvis was electrified. This was the kind of serious, dramatic role he had been desperate for his entire career. A real film, a real actor's challenge, a chance to step outside the rhinestone jumpsuits and the tired formula pictures and prove what he was capable of. Jerry has said that was the last time he saw the twinkle in his friend's eye. What happened next extinguished it permanently. Colonel Tom Parker talked Elvis out of taking the role. The colonel told him Streisand would be in charge, that it would be her movie and not his. Elvis later regretted the decision deeply, feeling he could have played that part. Parker's demands were too much. He wanted Elvis to receive top billing over Streisand, a salary of $1 million and a daily allowance. The demands were considered far too much, and the role went to Chris Christopherson instead. Elvis never recovered from that loss. Jerry did not view the colonel as a truly bad man. He described Parker as intimidating and old school, someone who never really understood rock and roll music. But more importantly, he said Elvis outgrew the colonel. Elvis wanted to experiment, to grow, to try new things, and the colonel would not allow it. The secret that Elvis made Jerry swear to keep was wrapped up entirely in this dynamic. Elvis felt trapped. He felt like a man who had been given extraordinary talent and then watched that talent go to waste inside a machine that cared more about profit than art. He was ashamed of it, and he didn't want the world to know how humiliated he felt. Perhaps the most revealing truth Jerry has shared is the extent to which the people surrounding Elvis enabled his decline in order to keep the revenue flowing. The doctor, George Nikopoulos, prescribed large quantities of sedatives and narcotics, 10,000 doses in the first 8 months of 1977 alone. Colonel Parker booked a man who could barely walk in the months before his demise, reportedly to cover his own gambling debts, and the Memphis Mafia itself had become an ecosystem of employees who relied entirely on Elvis's generosity and were too afraid to shut down the machine long enough to get him real help. Elvis knew in his quieter moments that the people around him were not able to save him. He knew the system he was trapped inside. He knew that his manager would not let him do the work he wanted to do, and that his doctor would keep prescribing whatever kept him functional enough to perform. That was the secret. Not just that Elvis was unhappy, but that he knew exactly why he was unhappy, and he believed that the people closest to him had failed him. He did not want that to define his legacy. He asked Jerry to protect him from being remembered as a victim. The secret also carried a personal dimension that went beyond career frustration. Elvis's sense of failure was intimate and private. He was divorced, but deep down wanted his family back, and it was not working. Priscilla did not want to return to that situation. The public image of Elvis as a conqueror was completely at odds with the private reality of a man who felt he had lost control of nearly every important thing in his life. His career, his marriage, his health, his freedom to grow as an artist. Jerry carried all of that. He honored what Elvis had asked of him. And now, finally, with the distance of decades behind him, the truth can be told in full to honor and uphold. When a truth that has been hidden for a long time finally comes to light, it does not always destroy what people believed. Sometimes it makes the picture fuller. Sometimes it makes the subject more human, more real, and ultimately more deserving of the admiration they already had. That is what Jerry Schilling's revelation does for the legacy of Elvis Presley. It does not tear the king down. It explains him, and in explaining him, it rescues him from the two-dimensional version of himself that the entertainment industry spent decades constructing. The standard story of Elvis Presley ends in tragedy and excess. A superstar who lost himself in prescription pills, who gained weight and gave erratic performances, who ended alone on a bathroom floor at 42. That story is not wrong, but it is incomplete in a way that is almost cruel. According to Jerry, Elvis did not pass away because he was weak. He lost his life as a result of a systemic failure involving the people around him that was too economically dependent on him to intervene. That is a fundamentally different story. It shifts the weight of responsibility from one man's personal failings to a web of enablers who prioritize money over the life of the person at the center of it all. When Elvis had a genuine challenge in front of him, he would prepare like a champion, losing weight, rehearsing obsessively, channeling all of his energy into the work. That was the 68 comeback special. That was what Elvis was capable of when someone gave him something worth doing. The tragedy was not that Elvis lacked the will to save himself. The tragedy was that the opportunities to challenge him, to give him work that matched his actual talent, were systematically blocked by the people who controlled his career. His complicated relationship with Colonel Tom Parker is now being examined more carefully than ever, particularly through recent documentary work. The picture that emerges is of a manager who locked his client into arrangements that served commercial interests at the expense of creative ones. Elvis returned from the Army in 1960 and walked into a multi-year movie contract that had very little to do with what he actually wanted to do with his talent. For years, the Colonel's role in Elvis's decline was discussed in hushed tones. Jerry's willingness to speak directly about it now draws a clearer line between the decisions that were made and the consequences that followed. The revelation also changes how people should think about the Memphis Mafia itself. That group of men has often been portrayed as yes men and enablers, a crowd of hangers-on who told Elvis what he wanted to hear and took whatever he would give them. Jerry Schilling was never that person. He was specifically noted by people close to Elvis as one of the few men willing to actually tell Elvis the truth. Elvis respected his opinion in a way he did not respect the opinions of most people around him. Jerry's honesty within that group was rare, and his honesty now, decades after Elvis's passing, carries the same quality. For the Presley family, what Jerry has chosen to share resonates deeply. Jerry's connection to the family extended across generations. He was present for the birth of Lisa Marie. He later became her first manager. He spoke at her memorial service in January 2023, drawing both laughter and tears from the audience gathered at Graceland to say goodbye to Elvis's only child. His place in that family was not ceremonial, it was earned through decades of genuine care and consistent presence. The things he has now chosen to reveal carry the weight of that history. They are not the words of an outsider looking in. They are the words of someone who was there. Jerry Schilling is now in his late 70s. he has lived a full and accomplished life, entirely on his own terms, shaped in part by the extraordinary friendship that began on a football field in 1954. 48 years after Elvis's passing, Jerry continues to speak about his legacy, discussing Elvis's generosity for his fans, his physical struggles, and the ongoing impact of Colonel Tom Parker on everything that followed. He speaks carefully, with the precision of someone who has thought about every word for a very long time. He is not doing this for attention or money. He is doing it because the true version of Elvis Presley deserves to live. And because the promise he made to keep a secret was always meant to protect a living man, not to bury a dead one under an incomplete story forever.